All right. Thank you for having this interview with me. If you don't mind, could you please give yourself an introduction to the audience?
Sure, Terrius. My name is John Lovell. I'm an attorney here in Metro Atlanta. I have been here now for 27 years, and I've been practicing law for over 31 years.
31 years. And over the span of those 31 years, has it been relatively hard to adjust to getting from the beginning to the end of your career?
Aha. Well, it's like everything else. It comes one day at a time. So hard to have foreseen 31 years ago where I would be today.
Mhm.
But as you look back on it, it was just a series of steps that I didn't. Fortunately, I didn't look too far ahead, and just took it. To say one day at a time would be an oversimplification because there's certainly planning
Mhm.
that goes in that is involved, but one step at a time.
Now, to give watchers an idea, what was it like going into law school? For anybody that's trying to go to law school, what was it like? What should you prepare for?
Yeah, well, I was a first generation lawyer. We no lawyers in my family. We didn't have a family lawyer. Um, really didn't socialize. Actually, no, really in that sense, we didn't as a family socialize with any lawyers.
Mhm.
So it was new for me. What you're doing by talking to lawyers um, is the first thing I would recommend. You know
Mhm.
exactly what you're doing and seeing what they've done, what worked,
Mhm.
and what didn't work for them, um, and just to get as much guidance and information as you can.
Mm. And what undergraduate school did you attend before you went to law school?
So I started at the University of Florida. You look like a bulldog today, but and my youngest daughter graduated not too long ago from Georgia, so I can say go dogs.
Hmm.
But I ended up graduating from Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I transferred.
Oh, and what major did you go into?
I was a history major.
History major.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and how much does somebody's major impact them going to law school?
Yeah, I think a wide variety of majors can be a good preparation for law school. Traditionally, history and political science has been popular. Um, People do a lot of writing. English can be great. People do intellectual property, and the sciences are great to understand. Engineering and chemistry and things like that can be applied in certain areas. So it's really just about getting a good, solid undergraduate education with less focus on the major, more focus on doing well,
Hmm.
and learning how to reason. I think helps and to learn and to understand.
Absolutely. And how much has your major in history applied to what you've done in school, in law school specifically?
Yeah, I don't think it. They kind of go somewhat hand in glove because law school. I think to at least for me, I think many lawyers have a natural interest in history and world events. It seems to be somewhat related to law, but at the end of the day, it's made me no better or worse of a lawyer by being a history major as opposed to
Mm.
something else that might have helped to prepare me. One I left out, I remember back in, I had some friends that were philosophy majors,
Hmm.
some certain degrees that are hard to find jobs with unless you go to law school or get a teaching certificate or something.
Hmm.
Uh, Philosophy and history are two of them.
So, how much of what you've learned in law school has supported what you've done in the law field? What type of attorney are you?
I practice criminal defense
Criminal
and almost
defense.
exclusive, well, largely I should say, largely federal, but I do some Georgia in the Georgia state courts as well.
Has law school prepared you for criminal defense, or did it have nothing to do with it?
No, law school prepared me in the sense that it prepared me to be a lawyer.
Hmm.
For the most part, law school you can focus, particularly in your the second half of law school, you can focus on classes, electives that are in your field of study,
Hmm.
but it's there's a lot of on the job training. There's a lot of it that you have the mindset to think like a lawyer when you come out of law school,
Hmm.
but you learn a lot, and it doesn't stop. I would say, I mean, obviously, it's like anything else. The learning curve is steep at the beginning, But
Mhm.
after 31 years, I'm still learning new things and I'm getting better. Not changing or improving hope as much as I did 20 years ago, but I'd like to think still getting better.
Yeah, and if you do remember, how was that like first day for you on the job? Like, oh, I'm finally a lawyer. I got to do this. What was it like for you?
Yeah, so I was in a place where the training wasn't the best.
Hmm.
I started my ultimate employer my last semester of law school. I had an internship with the DA, and it was it was a privilege. But as a third year law student, I went to night court and handled misdemeanors,
Hmm.
and some of them on my own. And I recall my first day having not yet gotten the bar results. I was practicing law. I was hired. The DA gave me a job, believing. Fortunately, her belief was well founded. I did pass the bar
Hmm.
on the first attempt, and I was practicing law though as a provisional admission, having taken the bar and graduated from law school. And I believe it was my first day. I went to night court,
Hmm.
handling misdemeanor cases, and there was a certain sense that the criminal defense attorneys could were circling like sharks and could smell blood in the water. They had
Yeah,
a new guy, and they were all kind of poking for super good offers and seeing if anybody could get me to bite.
yeah.
But it would have been nice to have had a little bit more mentoring. But it was a busy office. They had to get things covered and wanted everybody working pretty much from the start, handling a caseload. So it was a great experience. As I like to say, if it doesn't kill you, it'll only make you stronger.
Yeah,
And that
absolutely.
may be that reflects upon the beginning of my legal career.
So I know, back to like the shark comment you had made. I know there's like a common perspective or conception of like what lawyers are. They're money hungry. They only want to do this. They want to do that. What's your perspective on that? Is it a misconception or?
Well, lawyers are. There's a funny truth about lawyers, and that is that lawyers are people,
Mhm.
and people run the gamut. There lawyers that are just money hungry or unduly money hungry, of course. Or there's some that really want to make a positive change in their communities.
Mhm.
Yes, of course. So I would just encourage people to be a change agent, to be a positive. But on the flip side, we want to live a comfortable life. We want to provide for our families. You and I have moved outside. We were in a restaurant. We
Mhm.
were visiting. It was kind of loud to conduct the interview, but we were talking about that a little bit about just the need to provide for our families and we want to have a good living and a successful career.
Mhm.
But yeah, are there lawyers that in criminal defense that charge people, overcharge them, take advantage? Yeah, there are. Are there people that will give their time to help somebody out? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, so, like all other human beings, lawyers run the gamut.
Now, was there whatever like a specific driving force for you for becoming a lawyer?
So, and I mentioned this to you inside that I can hardly remember wanting to be. I don't recall ever wanting to be anything other than a lawyer. I have memories of wanting to be a lawyer as early as 6 years old. And for somebody that grew up in an environment where there were no lawyers, I'm not quite sure how I came to that determination
Mhm.
that I wanted to do that. Uh, it's almost as if it was God inspired. I don't know because it's hard to imagine where that came from. But I did come from a poor family, and I
Mhm.
think I saw that I knew that I wanted to have something where I wouldn't be poor and I wouldn't be defenseless. And lawyers typically have the ability to be neither of those, neither poor nor defenseless.
Mhm. Now, a lot of people are going to have to take the bar exam eventually and take the LSAT. What are some tips that you can give? Because sometimes people don't get on the first try. So, what exactly can you do to
Yeah,
increase that chance?
yeah. So the LSAT, I think the LSAT is really in my opinion, at least the LSAT that I took, 35 years ago or more is thereabouts, we'll say, really was an effective test of the ability to think logically.
Hmm.
Um, and one thing to do is to take, whether you take a course that you pay for or just simply get the book and answer questions, study from a book and learn how to answer those questions. But I do believe that at least my perception 35-ish years ago was that it was a good measuring rod of the ability to just reason,
Hmm.
uh, to work through problems. As far as the bar exam goes, my biggest advice would be look at the passage rate of the law school you go to. If you are only able to get into a law school that has a very low pass rate, think about whether law is the profession for you. Because that's a law school. If a law school only has, 2/3 or fewer of their students passing the bar exam on the first attempt,
Hmm.
that's a lot of time and money to invest. If you're that 1/3, if you feel like you're strong enough that you'll be in that, again, my example, 2/3, then go for it. But those are typically, if not always, private schools, and they are typically more expensive
Yeah,
than the public
absolutely.
schools.
So, a lot of people go into law, and there's like so many different fields. Why did you choose defense versus becoming a prosecutor or corporate? Why did you choose that?
Yeah, I did not have a lot of guidance. I had an offer from the United States Air Force to go into the JAG, and I hadn't put out a lot of applications, but I went to the JAG in the DA's office,
Hmm.
and an attorney I talked to said, "Oh, that I'd be much happier to be in a DA's office, and I'd be connected to the local community, and it'd be a great career move." It worked out well for me, so I have no complaints. But the JAG would have been a pretty good choice as well. The Judge Advocate General might have done more of a variety. I have no regrets because I'm very pleased with the direction that my life has taken and that my career has taken.
Hmm.
But sometimes, like in life, so many decisions, there's a fork in the road, there's a choice, left or right, and we make that choice, and hopefully it turns out to be the right choice. And I feel like that has been the case
Yeah, and the whole
for me.
idea of this channel is to understand what success is. What's your own personal definition of success?
Yeah. Well, I would put before career success, I would put higher than that relational success
Hmm.
because while I've been a lawyer for over 31 years, I have, and I'm just doing the math. Yeah, over 30. Keep going back to that. I've been a husband now for it'll be 35 years this year. My wife and I were married a week before
Hmm.
I started law school, and that turned out to be a decision that was a good decision, a great decision, the best decision of my life. My wife ever watches this. Um, and I have 3 children, and I have great relations with my children and friends, and um, I think real success is measured there. The things that aren't reflected in our bank account.
Yeah.
But the other thing that you and I have spoken about a little bit is that no matter how successful we are, if you're not content, you're never successful enough. And there's a balance between contentment, right?
Hmm.
You don't want to be a discontent person, but on the other hand, you don't want to be apathetic or not driven enough. There's that balance. And for me, I think I've found a good balance where I'm both driven,
Hmm.
but then also content. A strange balance that would take us a whole nother interview to probably hash through and to try to, find where I have landed on that balance. But it is, I'm been very fortunate, but my material possessions are not the focus of my life. They are just a wonderful added benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people get caught up in the idea that, oh, if I got a lot of money or if I have all these nice cars surrounding me, I've succeeded in life. But that may not always be the case. But what's some advice that you could give to the younger generation? Speaking from the older generation to the younger generation, what could you tell us?
Yeah, I don't think you can ever replace hard work, um, to succeed. And there are just times in life when you just have to pay your dues.
Mm.
I don't know if law school has gotten kinder and gentler, but law school was tough. I mean, it was 3 years of, of studying and
Mm-hmm.
hard work. Early on in my career, I didn't think twice about getting up and going to the DA's office and being in court in the morning, and then you know maybe 2 nights a week. I Most of the time I had time to go home and have grab dinner with my wife, and then head back out and cover a night court from 7, and usually they'd start at 7 o'clock at night and get home at sometime after nine,
Mm.
and get ready for court the next morning. And it was just part of life. I didn't resent it. I was glad to have a job and to pay my dues and to learn and to overcome that learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's rare that things are handed to people. I didn't have anyone hand it to me, and most people should come with the expectation that they're going to have to work hard. And you will almost always succeed if you're the hardest working person in the room. And
Mm.
again, there's a balance to that. And sometimes that's about being efficient and taking care of your personal needs so that you're rested and refreshed and ready to do that hard work that it takes to succeed and to get to the other side of that learning curve. I am 58 now, and I don't work as hard. I have other interests that I pursue. I'm still very much a practicing lawyer, but I'm not working as hard as I once did. And that's because I don't take as many cases. I don't have the
Mm.
need for that. Some people choose to. So I have friends that are driving just as hard, working just as hard now as they were 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's just not necessary. It doesn't equate with my goals in life and where I see myself today in 10 years and 20 years, and by the grace of God in 30 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do remember you mentioning like the amount of time you were putting into like the DA's office and stuff. How much time were you putting into being a lawyer? Like at the peak of it, how much time per week?
What do you mean while I was working in the DA's office?
Yeah, like DA's office and while you were working as an attorney, like what's the most amount of time you were working per
So
week?
all that I've ever done is either in the DA's office or private practice as a criminal defense attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it varies. So in the DA's office, you have to succeed at that job.
Mm-hmm.
You should be trying cases. If you're in a DA's office and you're not trying cases, you need to explain to me what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
um, because I just don't know of a DA's office where an assistant district attorney should not be trying cases.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that's a big buildup to say that it takes time to get ready to be ready for trial. It takes time to prepare for that,
Yeah.
and that's going to mean that in the weeks and in the weekend or the weekends leading up to a trial that you're going to have to put in extra work,
Mm.
and that should be expected because when you should have as a lawyer you should have that sense of personal pride that says I'm on the stage. I'm in front of a jury of whether it's a misdemeanor with 6 people or a felony with 12 jurors, a judge, sometimes people in the courtroom watching you, and you're representing, in my case, whether it was the state of New York,
Mm-hmm.
the state of Georgia, or the United States of America.
Yeah.
I'm their representative, and I need to be prepared. I need to, at the conclusion of that case, I need to sit down and to know that I knew my case and that I presented it to the best of my ability. And that's doubly true now when an individual entrusts sometimes their well, they're very frequently their freedom, and I would say their life
Mm-hmm.
in a sense. It's not We don't see death penalty cases very often,
Mm-hmm.
but their life in the sense of it could be the next 10 years of their life. It could be the next 20 or 30 years of their life, whether they're going to be free or not. So that's a tremendous amount of responsibility. And a lawyer who doesn't take that responsibility seriously on either side of the equation that I've just described ought not to be doing it. They should be doing something where lives are not on the line. And that's truly the case in criminal law, that lives are on the line, people's freedom. And for the prosecution, I'm realistic enough to appreciate and to be able to say that prosecutors are not only representing the state and the government, but they are the voice of people that have been victims of
Mm.
crime. And it's important for those people. While I advocate zealously for my clients, I appreciate what the prosecution does when they're righteous, when they sometimes they run askew, they miss the point, they miss the target. But when they have a righteous case, they should be prepared
Mm.
to be the voice, whether it's the victim of a homicide or an assault, sexual assault, um, all sorts of crimes. That it's a heavy responsibility. So you should be prepared to be able to come into court and to know that you're at the that you are representing your client to the best of your ability.
Now, I know there's of course like time gated amount of time you have before you have to do a case and present it. How much time do you really have generally whenever you're like getting ready to do a case?
Yeah, that's a matter of personal time management and planning ahead, and
Mm-hmm.
the resources that the office has.
Mm-hmm.
A good office with a good investigator, paralegal. You've got them gathering documents and maybe even interviewing witnesses for you months and sometimes years in advance,
Okay.
where that stuff is that the groundwork is being laid so that you're ready to know the case, because a mistake that both the defense and the prosecution can make is, as you're leading up to a trial, not knowing your case, whether you're a prosecutor who overestimates your case or a defense attorney who underestimates the prosecution case.
Mm-hmm.
uh, Sometimes those cases need to be resolved, and that requires both sides being familiar with their case. So you really should become familiar with it as soon as you possibly can, um, to be able to make those judgments and to be able to counsel your client. Sometimes the best thing that a defense attorney can do is to say to his client, "I think this is a case that we should see what we can negotiate in the way of a plea."
Now I know that that's a common complaint a lot of people have about certain court cases that they take a very long time. What contributes to that?
Yeah. So court overcrowding,
Mm.
litigants, the prosecution and the defense, who just want to defer. They want to kick the can down the road, put things off.
Mm-hmm.
I had a conversation with an assistant United States attorney this morning about a case that's on a trial calendar for the end of May.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to her that just with my schedule, I really need to, we're going to need, if this case has to go to trial, we need to try it at the end of May. We can't continue it. And there are a bunch of other defense attorneys on the case that it's like, can be a little bit like herding kittens. Um, but she agreed. She said that it would get moved to the September calendar, which is already bogged down with a lot of complex cases. So the point was, and this is a relatively new case. It was only indicted late last year, so it's 4 or 5 months old.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to move it along and get it tried within the first year. Oftentimes, people just, they're busy and say, "Well, what about if we, delay this case for a while?" And sometimes there's just complex motions that need to be heard, discovery that's still coming in. So there are a variety of reasons. But crowded courtrooms, busy litigants, um, trickling in discovery can all contribute to it.
Now, with all your experience that you've had within this field, what's one of the most difficult cases that you've had to deal with, or one of the most memorable? Either one doesn't really matter.
Hmm. Well, the most challenging cases for a defense attorney are, I have a lot of them. So it's I as a assistant United States attorney, I prosecuted a gentleman who was a career
Mm-hmm.
drug dealer. That's what he was, right here in Metro Atlanta. He's kind of medium level, low to medium, just kind of making a living, not particularly big fish, but he was prosecuted federally, and he had, because of his prior convictions, he was convicted of selling only about 2 ounces of crack cocaine, but he got a life sentence.
A life
And
sentence for 2 ounces?
yes, because he
Oh
had
my
three
god.
prior drug convictions,
Ooh.
and I prosecuted him. And kind of in keeping with your reaction, now the judge had no option, and we made a reasonable offer to him. Again, going back to evaluating the case, we knew we would win the case.
Mm-hmm.
We made a very reasonable offer to him, and he rejected it. And at the time, I felt like, that's the choice he made. But that compassion in me when I left the U.S. Attorney's office. I wrote him a letter. I reached out to him and I said, listen. The interesting thing too is that he and I were born the same year, so I always
Mhm.
knew when I had a birthday. I knew
Yeah.
Lewis was there in prison. Um, you know, a couple months after me, celebrating the same birthday number. But I reached out to him, and as it worked out, Obama kicked up the clemency program and focused on people with really long drug sentences
Hmm.
for. Oh, and by the way, he sold a lot more than the 2 ounces that he was convicted of,
Hmm.
but still, that's the count that he was convicted of in the indictment. But at any rate, I assisted in getting a clemency petition in for him, and he was pardoned by President Obama
Hmm.
after serving something like 15 years, which was not too far off. Maybe he served a little bit more time, but roughly pretty close to the offer that I had made him
Hmm.
after adjusting for good time. I had made him be pre-trial. He got arrested again, and his probation was or supervisory release was revoked um, for I think a couple of years. So, but I have no regrets about that. That's fine. If he sold drugs again, he one of these times he'll learn and he'll stop doing it. But I certainly wish him the best, and I'm glad that he didn't spend the rest of his life. So that was tough from a prosecution, something that I corrected. But the tough cases when you defend are people that you know are innocent. I defended a woman who, it's a long story, but she was incredibly naive and incredibly gullible,
Hmm.
and she did not see that her husband was abusing their daughter
Hmm.
and in filming himself, and the prosecution naturally thought that the mother had to know, and she didn't. She didn't. Most mentally properly developed women probably would have been more alert to it, but for a variety of reasons, this woman was born not with a mental disability, but a profound physical disability that caused her a lot of difficulties in life.
Hmm.
Never was loved by a man until about age 40 when this guy expressed a love for her and took advantage of her. But she went to trial
Hmm.
for production of child pornography, and I was able to prove that she didn't have anything to do with it, that it was all her husband. And there was critical evidence that came out at trial that showed the husband filming something, and he has set an alert so that when my client got within a mile or so of the house,
Hmm.
his phone would alert him, and he scrambled as he was trying to conceal it. So when I say her life was on the line, she was also born the same year as me,
Okay.
coincidentally. It's not meant to be the theme here, but she would have gone to prison had she been convicted. A mandatory minimum of 15 years in her case,
Hmm.
and she didn't. She wasn't. She was acquitted in federal court for that, and those are very serious charges.
Yeah. Sounds
Um,
very serious.
it
I'm
was
guessing her love for her husband probably caused a little bit of delusion.
It did. It
Yeah.
did. And as I said, she had been rejected by men. He was really the first man that she had been with
Hmm.
at about age 40, and it clouded her judgment. There's
Hmm.
no doubt in my mind, and she didn't see what my wife certainly would have seen. I think, but I was convinced, and ultimately, thankfully, she was found not guilty. So I wasn't the only one,
Oof.
and it wasn't. I wish I, but no, it wasn't. It was good lawyering to get to the proof that I needed to do to prove that she didn't know. It wasn't simple, but it's
Hmm.
a lot of pressure. She was in a wheelchair. Prison would not have been pleasant for her.
Hmm.
It would have been particularly unpleasant, I think. So
And how are you able to like process like information like that? Once the court case is finally done, are you able to process all the information you have received pretty well, or does it take you time to get over it?
yeah, no, I don't have a tough time um, processing it. I think that's probably tougher sometimes for public defenders.
Hmm.
I've never been a public defender. I have taken appointed work through the Criminal Justice Act in federal courts, but I've never
Hmm.
been a full-time public defender where you are just given a caseload. And sometimes I can imagine that might be more difficult because you're not able to choose largely. Um, and that could have an impact on somebody's psyche. Um, Dealing with that on a day in and day out sort of basis.
Hmm. Yeah, that's sounds like a lot to deal with. But to end it off, what's one quote or motto that you live by,
Oh.
and what does it mean to you?
Hmm. Well, there's more than one, but we were talking about contentment and success, and one thing that I always come back to is the Apostle Paul's admonition to Timothy: godliness with contentment is great gain. I brought nothing into this world. I can take nothing out. And he actually goes on to say, if I have food and shelter, that'll be enough. Now, thankfully, I've been blessed with more than just the mere necessities of food and shelter.
Yeah.
But I do try to always remember that. And that's just the scratching the surface. There are so many wonderful things, biblical and outside of the Bible, that have been a guide and a light in my life. That's just the first one that came to mind right now.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having this interview with me, and yeah, it was absolutely great. Thank you for the information. I'm pretty sure this will help a lot of people, so thank you.
Excellent. My pleasure, Terry.